All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to part 3 of Susan's chats here. And assuming most of you, if not all of you, have been to one or both of our sessions.
Yes, 3.
Awesome.
All 3.
Okay.
Oh my God.
Well, welcome.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is the last of her chats. They will be available on YouTube if you want to watch them again.
That's nice.
And for some residents who maybe made the first one or the second one and weren't able to see this one. So with that, I'll pass it over to Susan.
Okay, thanks, Ellen. Hello, everybody. Most of you I recognize. I feel like I'm a little bit loud. Am I a little loud?
No.
Not for this crowd.
Not for this crowd. I think it's kind of going back into my ears, so I sound loud to me. Oh, but we'll start like this. So maybe that helped you just take a nice deep breath and to settle in. Settle down, folks. You're going to be in for a ride today. Hello, do I know you? Have you been here? No. Okay. Okay, good. So this is the third of a series of 3, and just a very brief recap. We started off just by talking about, well, what is a death doula? What does she do, he do? You know, what is it all about? How can it be helpful or not helpful? And then I encouraged everyone to really get down into the nitty-gritty of thinking about, writing down, contemplating, having conversations with family, with friends, about what you would like your legacy to be. What are your belief systems? You know, you don't want to end up, you know, going to the other side and then having your family go, I wish I would have known this about my mom, my dad. We never had these conversations. And they are conversations that we always think, we'll have time. It's going to happen. But the busyness happens. You know, things happen, schedules happen, you know, it just, all of a sudden, here we are at the end of our lives. And what do our family and friends really know about us? And I do know that was the case even with my mother. And we did have some conversations, and she had a great memory for history of family and cousins and aunts and uncles and goings on like that. But there were several questions after she passed that we didn't cover. And I went, now who's left? And she was the matriarch of the family. So everybody was gone. And I had no one left to ask. And I do always feel a little bit bad about that. So that's why I encourage everybody to really start having conversations with your family. How many of you did anything with the handout with the legacy workbook or the couple of pages that I had given you last time? Because that's just a beginning of what are your beliefs? What is important to you? What would you like at your deathbed? Whom would you like at your deathbed? All those things are important because once you get to the point where you can't relay that information, it's just simply too late. Does anybody have any questions of things that we went over so far?
I just have a comment. I have a ginger jar, and I have lots of Post-it notes in it because I jot down little things, and I put it in that jar.
Wow.
Because then, you know, I know we'll talk about it sometime, and I was thinking it might be kind of fun when the family gets together just to take one out
Yeah.
and, you know, talk about it. Because my memory isn't the greatest. I mean, it's great, but, you know, not for these kinds of things.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. Well, and you know, it's funny because I did a workshop yesterday afternoon, all afternoon. It was a longer one. And we talked about, so how do you organize those kinds of things and what do you say? And that's why the ethical will is so helpful, because it just gives you all these questions. Because left to our own devices, it's hard to think, well, what does matter and what is important, you know, to leave behind. So it's a good exercise that I would really encourage all of you, so that you don't have any regrets either at the end of life as to how you would like things to go as well. And even writing letters to sons, daughters, friends, grandchildren, ex-spouses, you know, whoever you have in your life, to come to some kind of a completion. There was a woman yesterday at the workshop, and that kind of sparked something in her mind where she said, you know, I have a sister that we're estranged. We've been estranged forever, and it doesn't look like there's going to be a coming together. But just with that thought, she said, I'm going to write her a letter, and she's going to put it with all of her personal papers in the safe, so that after she passes, she'll be able to hand that letter. Because the resolution of relationships, of resolving any kinds of things in your life is really quite important, and it's not the best time when you are no longer coherent to do anything about it, because we're all going to be there at some point. So any other questions before we get going here?
I was going to mention that our son and his wife gave Wally and me a book called My Life Story, and for a number of maybe 2 months or 3 months we've been going over those questions. They come over, we have dinner together, and go upstairs and chat, and they're finding it a lot of fun, and so are we.
Yes.
And, we pop up with memories we didn't think we had.
Well, isn't that the truth? You know, because there's many online resources. One I think is called Storyworth, and every week they send you a new question, and then you do this for a whole year. So you get 52 questions. You can use their questions, or you can make up your own question, and then at the end of the year they put it into this nice book, and it's a beautiful thought. I always think I'm going to get to it, and I haven't gotten to it, but it's really a beautiful thing to do, you know, because yesterday also kind of provoked the thought to me. I feel, and many of you feel that way too, that I have really had many lives during this life, many chapters, so to speak, in this book. And you have different people in different chapters of your book. And my children, for example, they don't know a lot about me, and there are many things I purposely have kept from them. But now that they're older, you know, I think it would be fun for them to know some of those chapters early on, way before they were born. And, you know, and even my husband, I mean, we talk about things, but, you know, there's still things that were well before him, too. And so it kind of helps you put together those pieces. And it kind of provoked the thought, okay, I think what I'd like to do is just make an outline of the chapters of my life. And then, you know, do sub-chapters. Who were the important people in that chapter of my life? Were there any significant experiences that happened? How did that chapter change my life? How did it transition into the next phase of my life? So it's just all thought-provoking, and it's kind of a fun thing to do once you actually sit down. So I'm really happy to hear that your son initiated that. Yeah, I'm really happy to hear that, because everyone will be much happier and they'll feel more fulfilled, and they won't have all the regrets that unfortunately many people have when it's too late to come to terms with that. So today is the day where we talk about what happens toward that end of life. What happens to the body? What happens to the emotional state? What happens to your spiritual state? And how does that kind of look and piece itself down? So what I decided to do, and what would be a role of a death doula. And so what I thought might be interesting is I kind of wrote from the beginning of someone that I worked with some years ago. And all the things that I did with her will give you some idea of some of the possibilities of things that might either be nice, be wanted, or nope, not for me, you know, because either way it's okay, because it's just getting you to understand and know who you are better and what you feel the most comfortable with. So you up for that? Okay. All right. I jotted down some notes for myself. Okay, this is my experience, and I've changed all the names, with Judy. And I met her just a mere 6 weeks before her transition and her passing. And I was contacted by her spouse because at that time, Judy she had a lot of fears about dying. And she was starting to have some, what she called hallucinations, and that scared her. And the thing about Judy was she was near the end of a long, hard 8-year battle with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. So when I contacted Judy's spouse to see if any of my services would help her beloved, at this point Judy did not have any smell, she didn't have any taste, but she did have touch, hearing, and seeing were intact. She was even able to play some games on an iPad that she regulated through her eyes. She had been on oxygen for the last 2 years with only a few minutes off on occasion. She can't swallow, and a feeding tube had been placed into her small intestine to give her nutrition. For these 6 weeks, Judy's transition was a quiet unfolding of courage, the kind that doesn't shout, but steadies everyone around it. ALS had taken so much from her body, yet her spirit only grew more luminous, much stronger. Of course, there were lots of tears on and off because of anxiety and not feeling in control at all. But she faced each change with remarkable grace, meeting fear with curiosity and loss with acceptance. When I met Judy, she had no audible sounds, but her eyes spoke volumes of gratitude, of love, and of a deep knowing that she needed to get ready. I wondered what I could do to help her to face this inevitable ending. She responded well to guided meditations, visualizations that I walked her through. Her spouse, Sharon, and Julia, a caregiver, were her support team during these sessions. But on occasion, her niece was also present. Initially, they thought that they could just sit back and watch my interactions with Judy. I knew that the family felt helpless, and they were dealing with much of their own anxieties about death and soon to also be losing a loved one, that I brought them into the meditations and had them close their eyes and rest with the meditation. And truth be told, the caregivers, they needed the calm and the relaxation that came with these meditations too. And during our time together, I would massage her hands, her feet, her shoulders. Cranial sacral work helped to calm her nervous system, and she was very responsive to all of the visualizations and the guided meditations. This brought her into a centered place to more easily handle the fear and the anxieties of knowing that death was imminent and most likely to only be weeks away. In her final days, there was a palpable peace, as though she had already begun to slip into another realm of gentleness. She taught those around her what it means to surrender with dignity, to trust the process of life completing itself. Judy's bravery was not in fighting death, but in embracing it as the next natural breath of her soul. So now I'd like to just go through some of the physical signs of dying. They generally follow a pattern, but everybody is unique, as we all know. But it's good to kind of know what that is. Because I find so many of the fears in working with people who are getting to this time of their life have to do because they don't know. So they don't know what they need to be really concerned with. They don't know if they should be calling 911. They don't really want to be resuscitated at that point, but that's what's going to happen if you call 911. But very generally speaking, a person will have a decrease in their appetite and in their thirst. And breathing patterns can become irregular, sometimes with a little bit of apnea or very, very shallow breaths as the body is slowly shutting down. Judy's skin, especially hands, feet, and legs, became very cool to the touch and maybe a little bit bluish and mottled. And that is simply because the circulation is also slowing down as the breathing changes and is slowing down. There will be a loss of bladder and bowel, also due simply because of the muscle relaxation. Sometimes people, you will hear some congestion, some gurgling, but it's just a buildup of secretions in the throat. That not everybody goes through all of these in a great degree, but to some degree probably that's true. People talk about the restlessness and the agitation. Yes, it can be due to some discomfort. It can be due to some anxiety or a metabolic imbalance, but oftentimes it is just the body shaking things off. And it's really to the degree whether you would want to intervene. Because the body just is restless, the nervous system is shifting, it's just calming down in different ways, but it's not this really slow, curved pattern. Oftentimes it comes in little bits and spurts. There would be a decrease in urine output, and again, it's just another part of the body breaking down where the kidneys are beginning to slow down as well. And of course, the best part of all of it is we sleep more. And I know even when I met Judy over those several weeks, I had to time my time with her because she was sleeping about 20 hours a day. So there was just a short period of time in between. But that sleep is really grace, as the body is just doing what it's doing. And that too, I've noticed with family members, is very concerning because they still want to talk, they still want to intervene, they still want to have some kind of a relationship. But if you understand that the body is just doing what it needs to do, and if the family understands that, I think, and I don't know this for a fact, but I think even when a person is sleeping, because I've been with many people, I will still, hearing is the last sense to go, I will still whisper things that I knew were comforting to that person while they were awake, in their, close to their ears. I will still do massage as I did, and I knew that they were comfortable with, because not everybody is. Some people simply don't want you to touch them, and that's okay too. So it's good to kind of know some of these things beforehand, what is comfortable for that person, because then you can follow through with it. Because I know very close, when Judy was taking some of her last breaths, I came close to her and I knew she was just like, her breathing was really changed at that point. And at one moment she opened her eyes and she saw me, and you could just tell there was relief. Because one of the things that I think is very important is that people aren't alone during that time. I do see some people when they're actually in a hospice, in-house hospice setting, and just kind of walking the halls and going up and down and seeing people alone in many of those rooms is challenging for me. Because you don't even have to do anything really. People think we all have to do, but you don't. But if you are there, that person, I'm sure, just settles in on a presence being there. And if it needs to be a comforting presence for that person, sometimes I'll just sit in a chair in the corner, just sitting vigil with that person while their body and everything is making all the transitions. So I feel that is one of the more important things. But the other important thing is, at that time, people need quiet. Certainly can be some background music that's very soothing. And we're talking about, the days before death. I mean, weeks before, it's a different story. You can play music or whatever that is a little bit, that is much livelier, that is some of the favorites. So I'm just really talking about where we're honing in, because that's what we said we would talk about last time for today. And then there is this emotional and psychological signs that might be present. And this is also kind of disconcerting for people around if they don't understand that there is a withdrawal, because the person on that deathbed, they're just not interested anymore. They're not interested in the out here, their surroundings. They're not interested in the conversations, because conversations can get actually confusing too, because you can't keep track of them. It's different if you just gently whisper something in an ear versus hearing, even if it's siblings having conversations. It can get a little bit confusing. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't be talking in there at all, but one thing I found that's very helpful is to let that person always know who is there. So I'll go in and I'll say, "Hi George, this is Susan. I'm going to be sitting with you for about an hour. And then when I leave, I'll say, George, this is Susan. I'm going to be leaving, but Martha is here with you now." And that is very, very calming to the person in that bed, because way too often people come in and they start talking and or they might be doing medications or fixing the bed, and that's all fine, but let them know. Just let them know who's there, what they're going to be doing, and don't give them any surprises, because it's very jolting to that nervous system at that point. Because the person might be in kind of an altered consciousness, and where there can be periods of real confusion. Sometimes outwardly you can see the confusion, and that usually comes out with some agitation, I would say. And actually I wasn't with this person, but the daughter was on the phone with me because they didn't live anywhere close. And the daughter was on the phone with me, and she said, I know my dad is ready to die, but he keeps wanting to get out of the bed. And it's like, yeah, it is that kind of agitation, because it's like, okay, we got to calm this guy down to know what's happening. And that could be a time to give a little bit of a calming medication of some sort, because it can be challenging, because a person like him, just knowing the circumstance, he hadn't done any of this prep work like you guys are doing. And he was not happy. He did not want to go. And people who fight that way to the end, it's not pretty to them, and it's certainly not pretty to the family or the friends who happen to be around. So that's another reason, let's get our ducks in a row here, people, okay? And then there's some spiritual signs possibly where, and hopefully someone will know about these things, where that person is seeking some closure with relationships or forgiveness in one way or another, in making peace. Because I certainly have seen where a person, and I'm sure you've heard these stories too, where a person doesn't die until so-and-so shows up. They want that resolution. They want that closure. And if it can be a closure with someone who was estranged, where there was friction, and you can come and offer that, then yes. But if somebody wants to come and offer more argument, you get them out of there. That's not what's needed. It's too late for that in this circumstance. And then there's also this, and I put it under the spiritual section, there is an increased detachment. And this detachment is really to anything physical. It's to anything worldly. It's to anything out here. And I think it's important to begin that detachment as whatever your belief system is. You can put whatever words you want to this, but either the soul, the spirit is, that's what kept you alive. Because if breathing kept you alive, you could be kept alive, but no, the breath is that link, that it is really something greater than that is keeping us breathing right now. Because otherwise we would just give you more food and, pump you up with more oxygen and you'd be good to go. But that's not the way it is when it's our time to go, to exit this world. And if there is, in those last weeks, sometimes the language just sounds a little bit like, what are they talking about? Because oftentimes people in those states, they pretty much speak metaphorically, like they're going on a journey, or they're going home, and they're going to go see so-and-so who has passed, and that's that metaphoric language, because they are halfway into another space, whatever that belief system is for you. So there is a general timeline to active dying. So from weeks to days, that is when the appetite will decrease, fatigue might increase, mobility starts to really decline. And then from days to hours, the breathing patterns become a little bit more erratic. The skin changes start happening. And the person then gradually becomes non-responsive. And then from minutes to hours, that breathing really slows. It becomes faint. The skin cools even a little bit more. And then finally, that final exhale can occur. So to go back to Judy, after she took her last breath, whoever wanted to, she had a large extended family, and they did lots of family hoopla. They were Irish and they toasted everything and they blessed everything. And so when she was asked, do you want anybody at your deathbed? Well, I didn't know I was going to fit in the room, there were a lot of people there because that is really what she wanted. And then she passed, and most people at that point, I had just, because then nobody knows really what to do, I had said, if anybody wants to come up now and just say your last goodbye to her, this would be the time. And people who could do that, there were some people who were emotionally too distraught and they just left because they knew she was gone. But other people, it's also a little bit more of a closure to say goodbye to that body that is no longer breathing. So people are different in that regard. And then after everybody had a chance to do that, everybody, there was just, what was left was there was a hospice nurse there because it was a home death and they asked her to be there. They kind of timed it so that she could be there, which is kind of unusual actually. So the hospice nurse was there and I was there and the spouse and the caregiver were there. And we did something, I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but we did something with a ritual for the final bathing of the body. So instead of just taking this body and calling the funeral home and taking it away, because that's what essentially they're going to do, but they're not going to do it the way we do it. Or you can do it if you just do it on your own, if you're comfortable with that. So the four of us washed the body from head to toe in a ritualistic kind of a way. We had essential oils in some water, some warm cloths, even though you know the person can't feel it. It is just a respectful thing to do. And, so you're washing a part, you're covering it up, washing another part. But as you are washing, it's a very nice thing if anybody has anything to say, like these beautiful hands. Thank you for everything that you did with these hands. You were creative, you were artistic. I loved your flower arrangements. And for every body part, you can thank them for whatever that was in their life. And that's kind of a completion for them. It's kind of a completion for the people doing that. And then after she was bathed, she had prior picked out her outfit to wear. So then we were able to dress her in the perfect thing that she wanted to exit her body with. And so we dressed her. So she looked beautiful by the time the funeral people came to take the body away. And then after she was all dressed and laying there, then everybody else who was milling around in the living room, they had the opportunity to come in and see her like that. instead of seeing her with those last struggles of breath. And that's kind of a nice last impression too, that you can offer people if you decide you wanted to go about doing something like this too. So a few days later, I continued to stay connected with her spouse and to help organize, rid things, you know, because it was time right at that moment. You might not be ready to just start, you know, ditching things. So when that time was right, I came and I helped organize and figured out where things could go. And then I was asked to design a memorial service for them. And it was truly a celebration of life. Hers was like, I learned a lot from everybody I work with. But like I said, they were Irish, they loved parties, they loved to invite everybody. And it truly looked like a wedding to me. You know, it was in this big banquet hall and the tables were beautifully decorated with flowers and all the memorabilia to remember her. And they were very, very particular. Like, she loved going to Albuquerque. Oh, she was there multiple times during the balloon festivals. So they made a magnet with the balloon type of things for her. So everything they did was very much unique and specific to her. And then there was, then they just asked me to just help design that and then officiate at that ceremony and party that lasted a long time. I didn't stay that long. And then for months after that, I did regular check-ins with her spouse for the next months. So, and it's just check-ins to help to navigate the grief and the loss of someone that is always hard to see go. So that was the story of Judy. And I decided to do that because it kind of gave you an idea of all different possibilities, whether it is someone like me or a caregiver or a son, daughter, friend, sister, brother, whoever that might be, to give them ideas of the things that would be important for you to integrate. And the more that we educate people on all of these respectful, beautiful, nice things, the better. And hopefully people won't be quite as afraid of death when you have a better understanding of what's going on. And all of us will struggle a little bit in those last breaths, there's no question about that. But if you can bring peace to that person who is at that stage in their life, to me that's the ticket, That's what you are hoping for, is to have peace in those last times, those last breaths. Yes.
I know in different cultures, maybe I've said this before, but I wanted to make sure when my sister passed that they opened a window to let her spirit out.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought we were so lucky because there was a window to open. And I definitely, I really would like that. And I don't know if I'm in a hospital, what I would do. Any suggestions?
That's actually a very good thought because, buildings these days, many of them, you can't even open the darn window. And because, fresh air I think is really important. And I think if you're in a situation like that, I think even if you have some moving air going, it's helpful. So if you have a fan or something, I think you do need something moving. I totally agree with that, for sure. Because we didn't get into this too much, but So I talked about the funeral home coming to get Judy's body, but I have worked with people who wanted to stay in the home for the vigil and those days after for visitation, and the house was opened up. So in that case, you do have to have windows open because it is advised that you keep the body basically on dry ice, because you don't want, because the decaying process happens fairly quickly, or at least it starts happening fairly quickly, that you need dry ice, and dry ice is toxic if there isn't any airflow. Yeah, so, and there are some funeral homes who will help set that up for people. And there was one, it was actually a friend who died in California. So we were all there, and this is what she wanted. It was in an ancillary part of a church. It wasn't in the home, but she had a cardboard coffin, I guess you would say, that she was in, and it was white, all the way around. And everybody came and drew pictures on the white cardboard. And she was a teacher. So there were children, there were people that felt comfortable being in that situation, that they all drew these last little mementos on this boxed coffin. But she was on ice, and just like you don't want the body to be alone in those days of dying, you really want to sit vigil, and that is true culturally in many different religions, and that you sit vigil for 3 days, and that means 24/7. Well, that was the case with our friend Christina. My husband's a musician, and she had asked Fred to play music for her, during the night. And so he was in this, and he was like, it was just a very strange kind of scenario. He was alone, at 2 a.m. in this room with our friend's dead body and on ice. It was just kind of things movies are made out of. And so he actually sang to her for hours during the night. And that's where I learned about the dry ice. He was loopy by the time, because nobody said, open the window, which he didn't. I mean, they were in California, so he could have opened the window very easily, but it wasn't open, so he never even thought about it. So that's where I learned about the dry ice. Not a good thing. Maybe that's his problem now. I don't know.
What is the typical relationship and collegiality with hospice?
As far as people like me?
Mm-hmm.
Actually very good. I've worked with hospice nurses who, first of all, didn't even have any clue what this profession, what they were worth or could do. But once they saw the action of being able to be available to the family and to that person in a very different way than they are, they just welcomed it. Because the fact of the matter is, I actually just talked to a hospice nurse who got out of the business because she said she wasn't able to spend as much time with people as she wanted. And when she was doing home hospice, and when she would go into people's homes, she had to keep her computer right there and talk about everything there. So it was like very mechanical in that sense. There was so much paperwork that she said it kind of had, for her, it had lost. And I don't know if that's true for all hospice, because they're wonderful, wonderful people, because I think everybody has the right intention. But depending upon, where you are, and I had one, I think I said this during the first talk, I had one hospice nurse, I was there for, I think the person was there for about 6 days, so it was a number of days that I would go in every day for hours, and one night I even stayed overnight because his partner wouldn't leave, but she hadn't slept. And so she was very comfortable with me, and I said, how about if I stay and you sleep so that if anything should change, I'm right there. I can just tell you, get up. And so that's what I did. And then at the end of those 6 days, I was leaving, and that same hospice nurse at the beginning, who was quite skeptical about, who you are, and at the end she goes, oh my God, I love this. She had won over. She said, I know if families need some extra help, I want your card. So that might be different for other people. I can't say that's across the board, but.
And what's a typical number of hours that a doula spends with a dying patient, and what is the fee?
The number of hours is totally up to that person and the family.
So just give us a range, please.
I would say if people had family and they weren't in the active dying parts, like with Judy here, because for several weeks she wasn't in the active dying phase. I was there once or twice a week for hour and a half. And then when the actual dying process is happening, those hours, again, because you can kind of tell the signs, how close it might be. It might be anywhere from 4 hours to 10 hours. It just doesn't, you just really don't know. And like I said, it's really dependent upon how much the family is or isn't around.
Sure.
And I do use a sliding scale. Sometimes people just want to pay an upfront price, let's say $1,000, and that'll just cover whatever. So there's a price that's agreed on if they just want to do that. Other people who just want to do individual hour types of situations, it's usually anywhere from 125 to 150 for those hours. And sometimes if it's extensive travel, there's travel time attached to that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's 125, 150 you're checking per hour.
Per hour.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, but again, I'm really actually kind of easy. But anyway, go ahead.
I know that about you, yes. I just wanted to say that I had an aunt. She lived in Newcastle. I hired a hospice nurse, a hospice company, and they offered all kinds of options for when the time came. She died right after the 4th of July. A lot of people were on vacation.
Mm.
There was absolutely nobody available to come, and there was no place available. At the place they said there would be beds, there were no available beds. And so it was a very chaotic, uneven, uneasy, horrible turn of events.
On that note,
And so
there are many new hospice businesses in town, most of whom are not very good. So I just want to put out the warning for anybody who might. I'm sorry, I thought you were done, Nancy.
No, that's all right. I just brought that up not to malign hospice, but to say sometimes the best laid plans don't work.
And that is true for everything.
Mm-hmm.
You know that just in life.
Mm-hmm.
We do a lot better if we can just roll with the punches, because the punches are sometimes pretty frequent and you don't know what's going to happen. That is true.
So my point also is to plan as best you can.
Yeah.
And as you say, let other people know. So
Yes.
people can be more alert and prepared
Yes.
up front as opposed to behind.
Yes. Yes, because one thing that I've also done with families is let's create a rotating schedule of some sort. see where the holes are, so that everybody who wants to be involved can be involved. Let's create a phone tree. I know with one of the people that I worked with, he was a doctor, and they were in many different kinds of organizations. And it was really important to create a phone tree and to get him prior to know who should be contacted, that he will no longer, because they wanted to have it be more of a personal touch and not just have it be in the obits, but people don't think about that. But they, that was just one of the discussions that we had, because they wouldn't have thought about it. They're like, oh my God, yeah. So then she got her address book out, he got his address book out, and made sure that everybody knew who to call when the time was there. So there's lots of those details that's not what nursing is.
I have a two-part question.
Sure.
If one is anticipating or needing hospice, what are questions we should ask, things we should look for in looking at a hospice facility or service? That's number one. Number two, if interested in a death doula, and you're on vacation for 4 months in Europe, what are questions we should ask again for a death doula?
Okay, well, to answer the first question, hospice has a very clear delineated level of care. Like, they need to know if you even fit into hospice care. So they're actually going to be looking at the medical records and asking you a lot of questions. But I think the questions for you to ask them has much more to be with what we're talking about here. How often can I expect, if you're at home, how often can I expect somebody to show up? Nancy brings up a very real point, because I've had several people who just thought they were going to get into a hospice care center easily. They're busy. They're just busy. And how do you tell if one is good and not good? That's a tough question. I think what I would do, just in working with some of the places, is I'm very comfortable recommending a few places to look into. But even those places, everything has to do with the actual people working there. And that can change and that can rotate. That's a hard question.
I was hoping you might be able to have.
I will tell you, if you go online though, do you go online ever?
Some.
They will have the criteria to even fit for hospice, and they also have what you just asked. What questions should I be asking? They do have that online that's much more thorough than what I just said.
I was gonna say online they also have references from people who had them usually.
And I would take those testimonials very seriously. I mean, we take it seriously when we look up reviews for a restaurant. I mean, come on, listen.
True.
And some places, I would think, would be very particular about who they actually do hire, some more than others.
I think everybody has the best intentions.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm one of those people that I truly believe that when you are in a helping, working profession, everybody, that's what they want to do. They want to care for people, they want to respect the process, and they want to do whatever they can do. But again, everybody's human, and life happens.
But Susan, second question, how does one find a doula?
How does one find you?
We know you now.
Yeah.
Are
There
you
is.
online?
I am actually. I actually have cards here, and I have this at anybody who would want this. This is good for a 20-minute free consult to to ask your own personal questions. So you're welcome to have this, because I have a website, too, and it gives you a lot of information. But other than that, Kelly, who was here last month, for those of you who were here, she wanted to come today. I got a text from her this morning. Her grandmother is in hospice in her last days. And I said, well, that is where you need to be. So she is a death doula. So I do have recommendations for people. There is an organization, if I get this right, the Greater Milwaukee Doulas Organization, End of Life. I think they call themselves Death Doula Organization. But there is one. So if you just type in Death Doula, I'm sure their website, because a lot of what they do is they're really into the education too, which is what I love, is they do talks at libraries around Milwaukee. And there are a couple of people in that organization that are very dedicated. And then I personally know another death doula that, we can trade off a little bit too. There aren't enough, but they're out there. You just have to search a little bit.
I have a movie that I saw. It was called 21 Grams, and I think it's a foreign film, and it measures the weight. It's about measuring the weight of the human spirit or soul at death. And it shows in the movie, and people have also, there's a scientist that was looking into it too, but there is something about the weight of the person after they die. I don't know.
Interesting.
It was a great movie.
Good. So any last minute questions? Because, before you go, I do have another handout for you to take, reflection prompts about more homework. And if you care to, sign up for a free session, you are welcome to take one of those. But I think because we're just about time to end here, I do want to do a very short, let's all sit up nice and tall, because I can't leave you hanging like this. Just going to do a little bit of a grounding exercise for you, okay? So if you can just sit comfortably, close your eyes if you're comfortable, that would be great. And then just silently repeat to yourself, may I be peaceful. May I be peaceful. May I be peaceful. May I be free from suffering. May I be free from suffering. May I be free from suffering. May I find ease in the transitions of life. May I find ease in the transitions of life. May I find ease in the transitions of life. And then think about your loved ones, caregivers, anyone that you may know that is nearing death. Extend these wishes to them to be peaceful, to be free from suffering, and to find ease in the transitions of life, and extend those wishes out to others. And then take a nice long inhale through the nose. Hold it for a moment and fully exhale. And then when you're ready, you can slowly open your eyes. And I want to thank you all for coming. Thank you. And you were just a great group of people. Loved working with you, loved sharing with you. Thank you.
Thank you.